Right, hello everybody. Let's kick this session off. Very warm welcome to you all on this session all about talent. I'm Sarah Turner. I know I've met many of you before. I'm joined as usual by my co-founder at Angel Academy, Simon Hopkins, and our network manager, Michelle McQueen, and of course our brilliant speakers. As usual, to talk to us and ask questions, please use chat. Just before we get started, a little bit about Angel Academy and what we do. So Angel Academy exists to close the gender gap in startup investment, both the lack of investment going to female founders and the low number of women angel investing. We've been doing this since 2014. We backed 47 businesses in that time, many of them through multiple rounds. So we have more experience than anyone else in female investment in the UK at least. But while there's a lot more talk about the diversity problem in investment, the dial hasn't actually moved too much in terms of action. So while women are well represented in high growth entrepreneurship, so 26% of businesses, can we have the next slide? 26% of businesses have a female founder or co-founder in 2022, according to Beauhurst. When you look at where the funding goes, 87% of European funding still goes to all male teams. And that's from Atomico's annual State of European Tech. Some goes to mixed gender team and a very small proportion goes to female only teams. And then on the investor side, not a lot better. Only 14% of us are angel investors and only 7% of us invested in 10 or more businesses. And when women invest, our ticket sizes tend to be much smaller also. The average angel ticket size is £25,000 to £40,000 per deal, a lot higher than most women are investing at. And then probably most depressing statistic of all in European VC across the board, men still control 91% of the investment money. But just these things take time, we accept that. So just having a quick look at our impact, we've been tracking our progress against the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So while our main target is around gender equality, we've been scoring very well against many of the other SDGs as well. And really, really proud to have been announced in last year's most active angel networks list produced by Beauhurst. And this is based on quite a lot of careful data analysis, looking at companies' house records and looking to see who's invested in what deals. When Simon and I started Angel Academy back in 2014, what we wanted to do was create an angel network that not only looked different and more diverse, but worked better for investors, especially women, and especially people who were new to angel investing. And we're really proud that actually, I think, what we've got are some very strong processes that work well for both founders and investors. We have a quite unique, collaborative and structured due diligence process. And there's now a huge body of experience within the network. Many of our investors have very large portfolios and are extremely generous in sharing their expertise, both with founders and with new angel investors, likewise our partners. Speaking of which, quick shout to our fantastic sponsors, of whom Spinks are one and have been for 3 or 4 years now, I think. And at this point, without further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Robin, Chantelle and Jack from Spinks. Do you want to turn on your cameras and take over the stage? I'm going to hand over to them to introduce themselves and do a bit of scene setting before we open up for your questions. So just a reminder to put your questions in chat as we go along. We've got plenty of time to talk about them.
Thank
Over
you.
to you guys.
Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, this is our 4th year of working with Angel Academy. We love it. You know, we obviously want to see more female founders. So we're big supporters of that. But today it's really about ask us anything. You know, maybe I'll give you a bit of an overview of who Spinks are, first of all, and then a bit about us. We've also then just put a couple of slides together, just a bit about the current landscape and what we think it looks like. But feel free, as Sarah mentioned, to put any questions in the chat, and we will do our very best to answer those. So I'm just going to share screen. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. So who are Spinks, first of all, and why would you want to listen to us about answering some of your questions? Well, we're the trusted talent partner to the startup scale-up global community. We have worked with the startup community for the last 10 plus years. We've been going for about 30 years plus as a business, but for the last 10 years, we've had a real focus around the startup scale-up space. We are predominantly based here in the UK, where we have 3 locations, London, Birmingham and Manchester. So really following where we see tech hubs for the startup scale-up community. But as the banner says, we are global. We're also based in the Netherlands. We've got a small offering in Germany, and we've just recently launched in the US as well. Our clients typically range from seed right through to pre-IPO. So, you know, we do a lot of work in the early stage organizations. A number of our clients are in that series A, B, and C. And we typically have a couple of unicorns within our portfolio as well. The roles that we typically fill are no surprise. They're predominantly technology based, because a lot of our founders, CEOs or C-levels come to us with a quite difficult demand because there is a talent shortage. So typically it is around tech, but we actually work across the spectrum of roles for the startup scale-up community. Just to also give you a bit of an overview, we aren't our own brand. We are part of the Nash Squared portfolio. As I say, within that, we are the brand that is focused exclusively on the startup scale-ups, but you'll probably recognize some of the other names like Harvey Nash there within the Nash Squared community. I'm the managing director. I've been with Spinks for 22 years now, so quite some time, and work exclusively with a lot of the founders themselves. We do a lot of work, I believe, beyond just identifying good tech talent. We have a strong network, so we're very keen to introduce our clients to that network. We definitely help organizations with introductions to funding as well. You know, obviously Angel Academy being one of our partners. And we try and be part of the whole ecosystem rather than just there as a resource to call upon when you have a talent need. That's a bit about me. I'll hand over to Chantelle.
Thanks, Robin. As you can all see, my name is Chantelle. I'm the Talent Strategy Director for Spinks. I've worked in recruitment for 13 years. The last 7 have been focused on embedded and internal talent, so a very different way of working. I've been really lucky to work with the likes of TikTok, ASOS, Klarna and Multiverse, and my role here at Spinks is predominantly to help the startup and scale-up space recruit like these amazing brands, help them become more sustainable in how they recruit, so that one day they can grow and ensure that they have really quality candidates, great retention, all while saving cost. So a really flavoursome role, keeps me very busy, and it's been a lot of fun so far. Not quite as long as Robin. I've been here just under 2 years, but really enjoying it and looking forward to hearing your questions later.
Thanks, Chantelle. I'm going to hand over to Jack.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jack Capel again, as the slide shows. I've been a part of Spinks for 7 years now. So again, still not quite catching Robin there, but a good while. My career's covered most operational roles in the recruitment world, all the way through to working with startups, scale-ups, initially primarily in the West Midlands, in the Birmingham area. And now in my role, I get to take all of that UK-wide and work with all of the up and coming startups just like yourselves through to your investment journey, Series A, B, C, D, and maybe one day IPO or exit as well. So very exciting role for me, much more around sort of growing the future startups of the world, and have a lot of very interesting conversations working with founders on a daily basis. If you could just pop the next slide, Robin. Perfect. So just while I'm here, I'm going to give a very quick sort of opening view on the state of the current market. And I think I just want to really set the scene, because there's a lot of perception out there that there's a lot of high quality talent everywhere across the board, not just technology, but all sorts of different positions due to the high volume of redundancies, unfortunately, we've seen in the UK. To put a number to that, there's now over 250,000 redundancies made in the UK since January. And that was correct as of the end of March. So unfortunately, we've probably seen that number increasing as well. However, the reality is somewhat different to what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. A lot of these people were paid a very high premium on salaries, as they were generally hired within the sort of 2020, just around the COVID acceleration of tech companies. So a lot of companies had this race to trying to get to market with their product. They burnt through their cash much quicker. And then when deadlines weren't met, we're now in this phase where, unfortunately, that investment has slowed down, as I'm sure many of you have seen over the past few months, which has caused these sort of highly inflated salaries across a lot of areas, which unfortunately has now meant these redundancies. So in a lot of these cases, the urgency was to get product out the door, to make sure that the marketing spend was increased, and the speed of hiring was to get people straight into operational roles and adding value to the business, without necessarily always looking at their growth and their own individual's development for employees, or maybe they weren't set up in the right way to be able to help these people develop. So we're in this bit of a talent stalemate, where we now have people who haven't had the chance to develop and improve their skills, paid on a very high salary, based on their current worth, and organizations now not being able to pay these salaries to get them into their organizations. So that does mean we do now have this sort of talent level that is sort of being uncapped and is slower to get back in, and isn't there for you to make those really key transformational hires that a startup needs. So I'm sure many of you are looking for those sorts of hires now, looking for that one person that's going to be able to take your business to the next level. And they're really still quite sought after. And we're still seeing that talent shortage that has been going on in the UK for quite some time. The other big point that we are seeing right now, and this is definitely something that should be considered for anyone that is hiring, with people looking to reduce risk, there's a real rise on looking for more risk-averse options when it comes to hiring. The use of interim staff, fractional staff, utilizing contractors to get product to market once MVP or products are built, or the initial team structures are built, and that product's starting to get a bit of traction and make money. This is where we're seeing companies now push the button on hiring permanent staff, which is a little bit in reverse to what we would ordinarily see prior to this year. So an interesting thing to think about when we're first looking to make those hires. So I will leave that there with a high level intro and hand over to
Chantelle. So we're just going to briefly, Chantelle's just going to talk a bit about, so I think what we really wanted to do there was give you a very high level overview of the current talent landscape here in the UK. And just to reiterate Jack's point there, yes, there have been tech layoffs and there's been layoffs in the tech industry, but there is still a shortage in a number of those roles. And there's still probably a disconnect somewhere between expectations of what client feels, also then what the candidate is looking for. What we wanted to do next is give you a bit of an overview also on some of the challenges that we see from the founders and C-levels that we speak to on a day-to-day basis, but also some of the opportunities. So on that, I'm going to hand over to Chantelle.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, so this is certainly more operational than Jack's broader landscape view, but it certainly feeds into that. So From a candidate perspective, we're seeing a forever changing expectation from them and what they are expecting from people like yourselves as employers. So we're seeing the rise of what we'd call the portfolio candidate, which is essentially where people have decided to become risk averse, as Jack mentioned, and they're now trying to create multiple revenue streams. What they're trying to avoid is what happened during the pandemic and what happened during the great tech layoff. They've come to identify that the startup and scale up market can be turbulent. So they're wanting to create more kind of cash agility by having portfolio careers. And essentially that speaks to the fractional kind of language that you're probably more used to in the startup scale up space. We're also seeing the rise of gig ones as well. So essentially that's having one main career, but then subsidizing that with kind of delivery based roles to essentially play into lifestyle. So they have one main role where they will get most of their income and really utilize on the skills that they've built, but then they'll subsidize that with gig type roles just so that they can maintain lifestyle balance. So this is really interesting because as future employers of these people, we have to really start to figure out how we balance what we need from our workforce, but also what's going to attract the best candidates for you. The UK economic uncertainty, Jack went into that, so I'm going to skip over it, and we may have plenty of questions on that. But essentially, we saw a salary hike last year because demand was so high. We were then looked at a rebalance, but what we're starting to see is people are trying to maintain that salary because of inflation. You also have the knock-on effects in terms of your offices and other things. So it's a huge challenge for startups and scale-ups right now. In terms of skill gaps, what we're seeing here is, as Jack mentioned, a lot of people didn't have the opportunity to develop during the last round of growth. And this is really having a knock-on effect in terms of having those transformational candidates. We will go into that in terms of an opportunity here. What we believe is that early careers could be a really good way in terms of farming your own people to make sure they have the skill set required. We're also seeing that learning agility is really important, but we'll go into that. The final challenge is almost like a forecast. So what we've been hearing is that a lot of candidates or employees have been really unhappy with how CEOs or leadership teams have dealt with recent market challenges. However, they're holding tight because they don't have confidence in getting a new role right now or getting the role that they want. So they're sitting tight. However, when the market picks up, it's forecasted that you will see a lot of people resign for something new because of the way senior leadership have been over the last 5 to 6 months. So culture and retention could be a really big challenge for people this year. If we could go on to, amazing, thank you. So early careers, learning agility. As we mentioned before, there is this big skills gap. And one thing that we have been seeing is the rise of the importance of learning agility. Technology is evolving so fast that actually what people are saying is rather than learning a hard skill set or assessing for a hard skill set, we now need to assess to see how quickly people can pick up new skills. That way, when there is a huge transformation within a market or a market downturn, you have a workforce that can take their hand to something new relatively quickly. It's something that I'm really super passionate about, so hopefully there's some questions going to be coming up there. ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. Again, for me, this is a huge opportunity for startups and scale-ups to be able to take some of that recruitment admin and some of that recruitment craft and be able to do it yourself. If you link ChatGPT with Zapier, you can have an amazing recruitment marketing campaign, all designed within a morning. And so I think there's huge opportunity to free up some of your time if you're the person who is looking after recruitment right now. It's not scalable, it's not a perfect solution, but I think there's definitely a nice opportunity to bring that into your startup or scale up and really benefit from it whilst you're in an interim position. And the last opportunity that we are seeing is almost like micro influencers in your hiring managers. We know people buy from people. We know candidates want to see hiring managers early on in the process. We know that candidates want to work for rock stars. Bit cheesy, but it's true. So what we're seeing now is a great opportunity to really invest in your hiring manager's personal brand, to megaphone them out there to attract candidates. Ironically, very popular in B2C, it's now filtering into B2B. Huge opportunity, especially if you don't have a recruitment team. This is your recruitment team, this is your attraction team. So another really exciting area for startups and scale-ups.
Thank you. And I just wanted the last slide before we hand over to you all to ask us some questions is really what lies ahead. And hey, listen, I'd love to have a crystal ball and tell you exactly what's going to go ahead, but these are some of the ideas that we are seeing. Let's be honest, it's been a difficult Q4 and a difficult Q1 for the startup scale-up ecosystem here in the UK. And if you look wider across Europe, you know, I think we're down about 58% in levels of investment year on year, and only one unicorn, I believe, was minted in Europe in Q1, which is the lowest for 7 years. So difficult place. What I would say is there are early signs of the green shoots of recovery here in the UK. UK consumer confidence is the highest it's been in the last 14 months. And I think what we are beginning to see is we expect quarter on quarter incremental growth. So I don't believe we're going to start seeing the snapback that we saw post-COVID. I think this will be longer and steadier rather than that huge snapback that we saw. What I would say is there are some markets that are hotter than others, and seed is really hot right now. There's been a huge slowdown, as many of you will know, in later stage VC investment. So lots of VCs are actually looking at seed and pre-seed now. I think Kindred Ventures just came out on Friday with 130 million with a focus purely on pre-seed. So that's a big area of opportunity. I think also certain sectors are seeing more interest than others. So I think, again, many of you would have read about, you know, they talk about the demise of fintech, which I don't buy into, but it's definitely slowed down. But there are definitely certain sectors like the green tech, climate tech space that seems to be pretty robust right now. There are also different types of investment coming in. So moving away from the typical investment that you see with VCs, who are maybe being a bit more cautious right now. We're definitely seeing non-traditional investors such as sovereign wealth coming in and playing a part in this space. I'd also say the demand for digital skills isn't going to go away. You know, Chantelle just talked about generative AI, and we're only at the very beginning of what that could actually look like. We're going to see an ongoing digitalization of the economy, and that will drive continued demand for digital skills across all sectors, in my opinion. Another area that I would really suggest people look at is around the upskill and reskilling. As technology continues to evolve, and as we talked about, it's maybe even evolving even at a more rapid pace than we had been used to before. You're going to find that actually a lot of people's current skills will be out of date much faster. So these people are going to have to remain competitive in the job market. They're going to have to think about either upskilling or reskilling. So do think about that as an area of focus as we go through the rest of 2023. There's another part also, and I don't think we've got this quite right yet, is the remote working versus hybrid working. There's a lot of conversations that we have daily with founders around what is best. We feel that remote working will still be prevalent. It obviously allows greater flexibility. It does also reduce overhead costs for founders, especially at a very early stage. But we're beginning to start seeing more people that we're talking to talk about hybrid working, talk about being more their preference, enabling employees to work in an office and also do remotely as a bit of more flexibility. And my final point, just to think about on what lies ahead, is also around a focus on diversity and inclusion. I think, you know, Sarah, you touched on it at the very beginning. Historically, the tech industry has been criticized for the lack of diversity, in particular gender diversity. But a lot of companies that we're talking to are taking big steps now to address this issue. So I think this could also lead to increased opportunities across the underrepresented groups in tech. So that's something else that we see as something to watch out for in the rest of 2023. So on that note, Sarah, I might hand back to you, if that's okay. I don't know how to stop the slides.
We've had some good questions come through, so I'm going to be looking over to chat to read them out. But first one, this is probably for you, Robin. So do you want to end?
Yeah, stop share. There we go.
Perfect. Okay, so first one for you is a question from Nikki. She's an early stage pre-revenue climate tech platform. They're working with some great tech guys who've set up as a company and are acting as a CTO stroke in-house dev team. So a bit of what Chantelle touched on earlier. The bulk of their team is based in South Africa, and they have offered to take equity in lieu of payment. Nikki wants to know, you know, what are the implications going forward of this kind of arrangement? It is something we see quite often, that people start with an outsourced tech, and then, you know, they want to build in-house. What's your view on that, and what does she need to watch out for?
Yeah, so I don't know the total ins and outs, so please take a slight broad brush to this, but I'll be very happy to have a further conversation offline with you, Nikki, around this. I would say be cautious around this. You really do want to make sure you are owning your own IP, and that you can bring this back in-house at any time. The more successful startup businesses that we see do have the majority of their tech in-house, Sarah, that we see. So I understand it probably looks fairly attractive right now, especially as maybe running out of cash. Again, you know, we're seeing this happen across a lot of founders. I would just caution about, you know, how easy is it then to take this back in-house? Because if you're scaling, at some point you will definitely want to do that, Nikki. Jack, Chantelle, I don't know if there's anything else to add your sides.
Yeah, quick one from me exactly on that point is make sure the IP is with you. And if they are taking equity, it's as an investor, not a technical partner for life, because otherwise you're going to be constantly going back there for minor changes, can get very, very costly, and it will be challenging for your growth. But it's a great way to start, unfortunately, especially with costs. Is just make sure you've got that next step and next plan forward.
Yeah, I think totally agree. Treat it as an interim, and then you do some workforce planning to kind of create a succession plan for yourself.
And I was just going to add, you know, if you don't have anyone technical on the team who could manage and kind of oversee what they're doing, try and find someone or put them on the board, somebody who's kind of on your side in the negotiations with this as well, because yeah, you need a certain amount of tech skills to even get those contracts right, don't you?
And to that point there, Sarah, there are, you know, what I love about the startup world is that it's such a close-knit community. People will be able to support and help there. So again, Nikki, you know, if you were to reach out or even to ask us who we could put you in touch with, there would definitely be people that would be able to support you and be that on your side looking at this solution.
Right, thank you. So question from Simon Thorpe. Is that his first question is there still a shortage of software engineers in the UK?
Jack, is that maybe one for you to answer?
Yes, is the answer. I say yes is a very broad answer, because I will imagine those software engineers that you need in a growing startup are going to be very niche and very skilled specifically for your business. Those hires are still very, very hard to find right now. A good 60%, I would say, of our placement, 60-70% is in software engineering. that demand is consistently high.
And what other roles, so software engineering, what other roles are in typically high demand, and what have eased off the pressure?
Yeah, for sure. So within technology as a whole, it's still fairly scarce. You will see more transformational, like business transformational roles that are less. There are more candidates in the market right now, should I say? So business analysts, project managers. There are a fairly consistent flow of candidates that are able to hire quite quickly. Your software engineering, data, DevOps, UI, UX design areas are still very, very in demand across the board. If you go outside of that tech team and you're looking at things like tech sales or marketing, or even bringing in your own talent acquisition at one stage, those are areas where there are actually quite a lot of candidates available due to being the sort of they've been affected the most by the redundancies. So those sorts of areas of business, commercial areas, there are more candidates available. Chantelle, you might have some further thoughts on other roles there.
No, you read my mind with tech sales. I think that's the one that jumps up being probably as much in demand right now.
And sort of on the software engineering, is there kind of more of a supply if you're looking at, you know, junior, earlier career people, or is it really across the board in terms of experience levels as well?
Yeah, if you are in a position where you can facilitate junior hiring, there are loads of really great schemes you can have for boot campers. So we support a number of boot camps, and School of Code's one of those, where you can hire people off a 16-week boot camp. If you don't have internal resource, and back to the sort of prior question, if you're still relying on outsourced technology, that's a bit of a gamble to take your first hire at that level. I think that the shortage feels that pinch feels is because a lot of people want those mid to senior hires who can hit the ground running and add value. And I think everyone sort of goes off that same talent pool. So I think, Chantelle, you mentioned this in your opening, but making sure you've got that sort of upskilling and reskilling plan in your talent sort of strategy piece, that you know that when you have the capacity to bring people through, it's a really, really good thing to do as soon as possible, so that you are creating your own talent and that's sort of progressing within the business.
I would also say, and I was going to try and maybe not use the Brexit word in this, but you have to. Brexit has been a factor, Sarah. You know, we used to get a lot of candidates through from Europe, and obviously Brexit then with COVID has caused some difficulties there. I think there are some positives. Remote working, as I touched on, you know, the difference between remote working, hybrid working, remote working, especially in tech teams, seems to be more of the norm now, and certainly a lot more normal than it was pre-COVID. So that gives you a greater opportunity, especially if you're a London-based startup. Yeah, the premium you were paying for London developers was huge. Now there is an opportunity to find your development teams across the UK. We still haven't seen a huge, so some companies that we work with have global technology teams, but they are still fairly few and far between. Most of the companies that we engage with, and again, Jack, you know, Chantelle, correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but they do like, on the whole, their engineering teams, their development teams to be based in the UK, and then they can get together and meet up, you know, more regularly as well.
Okay, so the other part of Simon's question is, what do you think the average UK pay increase will be this year versus the 6% average private sector increase?
That's a tough one, right? Because
I think probably, you know, focus on scale ups on the tech sector. That's what you know. But
yes, I'm going to go with that one. And I still think it's tough because it's hard to say right now. So there is this disconnect at the moment, and Jack touched about it at the very beginning, because there is this perception that there's a lot of layoffs, that actually founders and hiring managers that we speak to are trying to drive salaries down to, you know, as I say, pre-COVID levels, whereas candidates are saying, well, hold on a second, I'm on this, I'm not going to budge unless you can at least match this. So, and actually, I'm only going to leave a job if I can get a salary increase. So we still haven't quite worked out exactly where that's going to fall. You know, I'm pleased to say that I think the crazy salaries that we were seeing this time last year, literally 12 months ago, seems to have abated. And I think the salaries are much more in line with actually someone's skills and knowledge and experience now. But there's still a bit of a disconnect. So I know I'm not specifically answering Simon's question, but I think there's this flux at the moment, Sarah. I think there will be pay increases, but a lot of that will depend on obviously how the UK economy grows through the next couple of quarters.
Right, thank you. To be confirmed. We'll come back.
I'd love to know, Simon, maybe Simon could give his thoughts later on what he thinks as well.
Okay. So this is one for you, Chantelle, because you mentioned it in your introductory slides, but how do you test for learning agility during interviews? And that question's from Kimberly.
Good question. So I think there's probably a couple of ways you can do it. One is more accessible than the other. So if you want to keep it in-house, there are definitely behavioural questions and tasks that you can set candidates. I have a whole bank of these types of questions that test for learning agility, and I'm more than happy to share those out with anyone. So essentially looking at how they can adjust quickly and pivot quickly. There are tests out there. You can craft your own test as well, give them something in a completely different department. If you're hiring on volume, I would probably then lean on technology. So there's one company called Assess First, who are probably the market leaders for using AI, funnily enough, to test for learning agility. They are very good, can be quite expensive, which is, I say, do it on volume. But yeah, they would be the two ways, either technology to do it for you or behavioural assessment to do it yourself. And I'd be more than happy to share like some specific examples of questions for anyone who wants it.
Can you put your email address in chat and then anyone can...
Yes, of course, that would be helpful, wouldn't it?
That makes things easy. Okay, question from Deirdre now. She's saying fascinating conversation, thank you. So that's definitely for all of you. So the first bit we've kind of covered, the specific skill sets that are in demand and less in demand. And then she's asking us a follow-up questions, is the freelance market kind of continuing to serve the flexibility need, or is it still better to hire?
It's a really good question. We are definitely seeing a little bit more organizations thinking about the mix of their workforce. And a lot of companies are thinking about this sort of 80-20 rule a lot more now, Sarah. So 80% of your team may well be permanent, but you actually might want to blend that with around 20% of freelance or interim to support, add expertise, or be there for specific projects. But equally, while the market is a little bit shaky still, rather than continuously adding to your permanent and then suddenly being in a terrible position to have to potentially look at layoffs, actually you could blend that a little bit more with an interim freelance base as well. So we've certainly seen that. We've certainly seen clients that even a year ago wouldn't have ever considered bringing freelancers, actually now looking to do that. And I would say that's more down to skill shortage, definitely, some based on project, but the majority I would say due to uncertainty with the wider economy and then not wanting to hire a lot on the permanent side.
Just to add to that as well, I think it's a really good method to use and to lean on if you're looking to hire people who are perhaps at the start of their career. So bring those people in and then on a fractional or interim freelance basis, bring in that higher skill set and niche skill set to take on a player coach role. That's a really powerful way of covering your immediate needs whilst growing talent yourself and developing talent yourself so that you can reduce that cost downwards, keeping to that 80-20 rule, but equally developing your own workforce.
I was itching to jump in there, but clearly I don't talk quick enough to get ahead of you two. Just a quick piece on the freelance word specifically, especially using platforms like Upwork. you get a really big variance of the quality of work, because a lot of these people will do fixed cost budgets and they'll take on 9, 10, 20 contracts or pieces of work at one time. You're not necessarily the prioritized client for them. Could be based on the product, could be based on what you're paying, etc. When we're talking here, this use of freelance, it's kind of more insourcing. You're bringing in consultants to your business to work with your team. That, if you're already outsourcing, that would be your next logical step, from my opinion, is to start to insource, even if that is contractors on daily rates, because you have that control back in your business for your team. As Chantelle says quite rightly, they're then helping develop the rest of the team around them, maintain the IP within the four walls, so to speak. So definitely make sure that when you do look to bring in any sort of technical resource from that side, that you're making sure exactly where that will sit.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to Susan's questions now. She has, so given the accelerating need for constant and rapid upskilling of the workforce, have you seen good models for managing skills development pathways and training platforms?
I'll go, but I think Jack and Robin will probably definitely build on this, because we'll all have a different lens to it. So from a purely talent point of view, what I've seen work really well is operating a business in huddles as opposed to functions. So there's a business called View City, really, really cool startup. And essentially, rather than running in set teams, they would run in huddles. So that huddle would be consistent of a sales and marketing person, a few tech people, and then somebody from operations. And what that would allow to happen is cross-pollination of knowledge, cross-pollination of skill sets. And actually, when it comes to a time of internal mobility, people within the tech could easily swap roles, and people from sales and marketing could easily swap roles with operations as well. So that's a really nice real example of how you can stack skills within your existing workforce. You then can look at training providers such as Multiverse. Again, if you're looking to go down the early careers route, they will give you ongoing mentoring, ongoing training as well. So it depends if you want to do it in-house or outsource it. But they're the kind of two immediate things that jump out to me. But again, I reckon Jack and Robin will probably have more to add to this one.
Jack, you want to go?
I'd say after you, Robin. No, I think you stole my only point, Chantelle, to be honest.
Oh no. Sorry.
Yeah, so just touching on what I talked about before about the sort of the upskilling and the reskilling elements there, Sarah, to that. I think there is a big focus on that. There are a lot of platforms out there and there are a lot of providers out there. And just as in anything, there are good, bad, and indifferent on both of those areas. We do have, there would definitely be some that I think we could recommend. So again, maybe that's a conversation that I could maybe take offline with Susan and have a conversation about. Because again, I don't know enough about Susan's immediate needs to be able to say it's definitely this organization. It'd be good, Susan, to have a further conversation with you, and then maybe we could put you in touch with the people that we would propose.
Okay.
Just one other thing, it popped into my mind. Mentorship programs. So running your own mentorship programs is a really good way to pass down knowledge and upskill people as well.
She's also asked an additional question. This is Susan again. So given the UK focus on health and biotech and its increasing reliance on computational analytics, are you seeing a convergence of these sectors with tech hiring in general? So are you getting inquiries from those sort of clients as well as your probably more traditional clients, I suppose? Is that...
Yeah, from my side, we're seeing a lot of seed, pre-seed, and even Series A health tech startups take real traction. So balancing between probably health tech and climate tech are probably two fastest growing investment areas at the moment. So a short answer to a long question, so to speak, but yes, definitely. I don't see that slowing down anytime soon either. recently spoke with a client which is under an NDA, but effectively being able to deliver medicine UK-wide via the use of drones. It's a very cool prospect from what they're looking to do with it. So there are people that are really going outside this box to merge that sort of technology into the health tech space, which is, like you say, more traditionally a bit more of a sector that was ready for disruption, should we say?
I think, Sarah, there's a point. A lot of candidates are choosing the next destination of where they want to work based around the purpose of that company, what they're doing, what sector they're in. And yes, while the tech layoffs may have slowed that slightly, I don't see it going into reverse. I think that will continue to be that way. I think people are making decisions not purely based around salary or equity anymore, but actually, is this good? Do I feel good to work here? Is this good for the environment, the planet, etc.? For people, you know. So I think that will continue. So I think those sectors that Jack talked about, the climate tech and health tech, people are pushing more towards that direction, actually, as places they want to work as well.
So that's a whole area, isn't it, of employer brand that often startups can compete because they're in areas that people care about. And
Yeah.
So just slightly changing tack, we've got a question from Tracy, and she's interested in operational roles. Yes, they're less in demand than they were, but she's, you know, in the scale-up market, in companies that have got the funding, not struggling to hire. Are there any sectors where you see more demand for operational roles?
Operational, are we talking
less tech roles? So I imagine the, you know, marketing and the product managers and.
Yeah, from our side, I think startups are very hesitant for anything right now, just because of where their investment's coming from, for any role that would be considered like a luxury hire. So if this is a operation manager or some description there, where are the teams actually effective enough to work together and make things happen without having that extra support layer? Right now, they're holding off making that hire. So we're still not quite back into a way of hiring, of committing to these hires that are going to really make that next step, until companies are really sure that their product's going to fit, that their marketing's going to work, that their business is going to be a success. So they're not really out there yet, I would say, from my side. Chantelle, you may actually have some different views or the same view, but we're good to get your perspective from what you see with your candidates and clients.
Yeah, you know, I was just rapidly going through the client list, thinking what people are doing as you were speaking, and I must admit, it's very similar to what you've said. Not really a lot to add there. I think that might change in the next few months, but I totally agree. They're holding a very similar mindset to what you've seen.
Okay, and then sorry.
So the only thing I'd maybe counter slightly to that, I think so I don't disagree with anything that Jack and Chantelle have said. I would just say, though, that this absolute focus that you saw startups be about everything being around the actual the engineering, the software engineering team, the tech team, because that was how even valuations were made on their businesses to some extent, by the quality of those people. I think that's changing a little bit, and I don't think we're going to have that huge demand anymore on that. So I think in that respect, Tracy, some of those operational roles and the key people in those operational roles will actually be a big factor around organizations getting an investment, not just have you got some great people in your software engineering team.
I think one of the points that Tracy was making was around, you know, it's around those are the employees that ensure that governance is a little bit better. It's not
Absolutely.
just
Absolutely.
so,
Yeah.
I think we all agree it's definitely needed. It's just whether you can convince startups at certain stages that they need it now. But yeah, it's a very interesting one.
So Crazula has asked, are you seeing any changes in organizational cultures? Are they trying to get more cohesive teams? Turnover has been high. You know, has that affected things? Remote working? Yeah. So what are you seeing in terms of culture? Who wants to start that?
Chantelle, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I was just trying to find the question itself. So if you could just surmise that question, just so it's a bit, you know, what's culture looking like? Is that essentially what we're?
Yeah. How's
Any
it changed?
changes?
Is it
Okay.
prioritized?
Yeah, okay, I see. So from what I've seen, and again, like Jack may have something to add here with the conversations he's had. From what we've seen, it depends on the demographic that you had. So the kind of the people who are at the start of their careers, a little bit more raw. What we're seeing is they have this real drive to have more experiences from their employer. So we're looking at a culture that's gone from quite isolated and remote due to the pandemic, going back to a experience-led culture. So going in and being part of a team and being part of a community again, and the benefits of that. So going out with your team for lunch, going on a walk for them. So from their point of view, they want more experiences. From a senior capacity, I haven't personally seen much change. I think there is a little bit of I think people are tentative right now because of what's happened with the market, and that's probably causing them to play like a very safe game. So for me, there hasn't been anything dramatically noticeable on that end. But what I'm seeing at the start of people's career is they are now looking at what businesses can do culturally to provide them with experience. So hopefully that makes sense. It's quite a broad answer, but culture is so big and every business has a different one, so it's tricky. But I'm more than happy to have a follow up on anything culture based.
Yeah, so Crisula's saying culture and structure similar to the need of organisation structure to convince investors. That helps clarify. So organisational structure, has that gone out the window, or are people still?
I see. Okay, so from what I've seen, there hasn't been too much change. But again, my role is working with our current roster, who are maybe at a very different place right now. So Jack, I don't know if there's anything your side, but nothing notable my side, if I'm being really honest.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think what is interesting is that the amount of people that ask that question, or want to make a change, or think they should make a change and really don't know what they want to do. And I guess our advice is always look at what you're trying to build. And I don't think culture, you know, if people say this is a good culture, this is a bad culture, I'm not always think I agree with those words. I think cultures fit different types of people depending on how you work and the role that you do and the job that you do and the sort of organization you want to work for. So the advice that we always give is create something that you want to be a part of, that you are driving this forward with people focused at the sort of the forefront, and sort of start there. And it's a good place to start. And then once you've had a conversation, someone like Chantelle can give you some real advice and help you drive it forward. But yeah, at that first stage, I think it's very, very difficult to define a culture, especially if it's you, a co-founder, 3 or 4 people, without really looking at your organization's visions, goals, and starting with your values right first.
Okay, I before we wrap, I wanted to get in with a question. So, you know, a lot of the founders we're working with are still early stage. They don't have huge budgets for hiring, let alone working with recruiters. But how can you work with them, and what's your advice to them? How can they work with you, and what can they get out of you at this stage?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. So we do a lot of work, obviously, with we talked about at the very beginning. We work with pre-seed right through to sort of pre-IPO. So it's a big, vast scale. But we do a lot of work at that early stage as well, Sarah, as you know, and we're very happy to. We have talent clinics set up, for example, where we meet organizations in person so they can actually ask specific questions to their specific needs. And we're really happy to kind of get those moving again, so following on from this webinar, but maybe a bit more in depth on one-to-one sessions that we can do with organizations. As you know, we host roundtables, Sarah, where we are happy to bring experts in and keynote speakers who we know or within that. And again, we like to welcome founders to that. So there are definitely ways that we can help organizations before they're in a position to maybe necessarily need to call upon our actual needs as working with Spinks. Look, it's really important to all of us, and I don't think I'm talking out of turn here to Jack and Chantelle. We love the startup scale-up ecosystem. A big purpose for us is to reduce the number of organizations that aren't able to scale. We want to support more businesses scale. We want to see this grow and grow. So the more that we can do to see that happen, the better from our side of things.
One thing to add from me is we have loads of data, so don't be afraid to ask us for it. If you need things, and this will really help with sort of pitch decks, and if you go in saying you need 10 people and you're going to spend X amount of money, we can actually back that up. And being able to speak to investors, having us in your corner saying this data has been given to us by a recruitment firm who just focus in the startup scale market, that could be really, really useful. And to Robin's point, yes, that's fine. That, you know, that's part of our role to help you grow through this area, because being very blunt, we need you to get your Series A's, B's and C's in the hope that one day one of our services could be the right match for your business. So the more businesses that we can help succeed at that stage, we've always got this to hand that we can pull together very, very quickly. So by all means, reach out to any of the three of us, or frankly, any of the people at Spinks. That we're more than happy to share their insights at any point and advice going forward as you go through your scaling journey.
Thank you. That's brilliant.
I would also I'll just add, Sarah, before we finish, there are very few challenges that we haven't seen or experienced. So, you know, we will be able to support. There's no doubt about that. We'll have an answer.
Right. Okay. I'm going to call this part of the session to a close, because I've got a couple more slides to whip through of how people can take their first steps with Angel Academy if they're not already part of us and our upcoming events. So if you're a founder and you're interested in raising funding with us, then please apply to pitch via our website. Michelle's going to be putting the links into the chat. That one's just gone in. If you'd like to join us as an angel investor, please email Michelle. And we're very active on LinkedIn, Substack, YouTube. We'd love to hear from you on all of those platforms. And then my very last slide is, as a lot of you will have heard, the SEIS limits have increased. These are the tax breaks for angel investors. Very important bit of news. We're running an update session on the 17th of May, starting at 6 p.m. on exactly what those changes are and how you make sure you qualify as a business and an investor. And again, the link to that event has gone into the chat. We'll be promoting it via the usual channels as well. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Particular thanks to Robin, Chantelle and Jack. It's been a really fascinating conversation. There are a couple of questions we haven't got to, so expect some follow-up emails.
We will answer them. We will answer them.
Yeah. Thank you again and enjoy your evening, everyone. See you soon.